Today I wanted to take a look at something interesting with Star Wars, because Star Wars The Bad Batch was just announced, a new animated series about the Bad Batch clone group 99. This really made me think. I really don't think Star Wars as a brand knows what the consumer or its fans want right now. This is something I've been thinking for quite a while. It really came into my head when I made the video about Knights of the Old Republic just being completely cast aside when Disney acquired the Star Wars brand, which I will link in the description below and at the end in an end card. Before we get started, I do want to say really quick, this video is actually sponsored by me, myself and I, because I did want to point out a couple of new things to you with the channel. First off, we do have a newer Let's Play channel. It's only been up for a couple of months. It's still kind of gaining some traction and some ground, where T, Nate, and I, and others in the future are going to be playing through a lot of different games. Right now we have the Resident Evil HD remake. We also have Batman Arkham Origins, and we even have Kingdom Hearts 1 in HD. So that is a really fun channel. Definitely be sure to check that out. The link is in the description below. And the good, kind people over on my subreddit told me that I need to actually advertise my subreddit more and let people know it exists. So be sure to check that out. We have all kinds of fun discussions over there, just like the Discord. And now let's look at Star Wars as a whole. Star Wars has been making a lot of weird decisions since it was acquired by Disney. Now, one of the biggest ones and most controversial was the death of the expanded universe. A bunch of this was great, a bunch of it not so great. So the expanded universe was pretty much everything outside of the original 6 movies. It was also the Clone Wars movie originally. It was the Clone Wars animated series. It was all these different things. All the books that were written in between movies, and since the movies came out, some of them taking place after episode 6, some taking place way before episode 1, and some taking place in between the events or during events of the movies. They were all over the place and of varying quality. This included comics, video games, books themselves, just straight up chapter books. I know a lot of people don't read those anymore, but yes, they were a thing and still are. This was a very massive universe that had been created over the years since the late 70s involving Star Wars. Now, some of these things I think are amazing. Knights of the Old Republic games, those were all amazing, I believe. The Shadows of the Empire comic, book, and game. Fantastic tie between Episode 5 and Episode 6. Those were great titles. The early post-Episode 6 stuff I thought was amazing. The Thrawn trilogy, the early Yuuzhan Vong invasion, stuff like that. But there was a lot of garbage, too, in the old expanded universe that I think people like to try and forget because they really dislike what Disney did. So the weird nostalgia version of this is, no, the old EU was perfect. I loved it. Disney sucks. And it really wasn't. I mean, you had a lot of weird stuff, like late post Episode 6, like the weird stuff near the end of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, Luke Skywalker being cast out of the Jedi, weird Luke Skywalker clones, Luke turning to the dark side, then back, turning to the dark side, all kinds of clones of Palpatine, the Jedi Prince series of novels. There's a lot here that was mishandled, and a lot of people even hated Star Wars The Old Republic, which was a follow-up to Knights of the Old Republic and is still going on, actually, and it's really the only piece of Legends material still being added to. So my point with that is just that while I think that the EU was not perfect and had a lot of problems, it had a lot of amazing pieces of literature and fiction that added to the Star Wars universe as well. And Disney, in my opinion, really should have pruned the old expanded universe. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, instead of just taking the whole thing saying, it's easier if we throw this out the door and don't care, what they should have done is taken it and said, hey, this works, this works, this works, this is a good idea. Oh, Star Wars Republic Commando, that's a great idea. That adds humanization to the clones. We should definitely keep that. Everybody loves Delta Squad. Oh, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This is far enough removed from any of the movies that it's never going to interfere with anything we did. We should make it canon, and if we want to go back and touch up on it and add more, we can then. And if we want to draw from it later, we can. This should have been the kind of things they were doing. And people say, well, that would be way too difficult, but there were already people monitoring with Lucasfilm and the entire Star Wars brand what worked and what didn't. I mean, people did look over the books. People did try and see if things worked and if they didn't, or if they contradicted and retconned each other. That was already a thing. And while there were mistakes made, there were already people keeping track of this. There's no reason why that couldn't have been done in a transition to the new series. I also believe that there's a clear lack of planning in the newer Disney brand of Star Wars because there was no clear vision for all 3 sequel trilogy films. This is going to come as a shock to some people, even though I've said it before. I like the sequel trilogy. I like Rey. I like Kylo Ren. I even like Finn, even though he's completely misused. Now, do I love everything about them? Absolutely not. I do not at all. And do I think that it could have been infinitely better if they had had a plan ahead of it? Yes. But I do think it's worth clarifying that I still enjoy them as a whole. My point is not to just sit here and blow the sequel trilogy out of the water because I think that's become the popular thing to do. When I was a kid, the popular thing was to do that with the prequels, was just to take a ton of pot shots at the prequels, say they're terrible, anyone who likes them is an idiot. And now that has transferred over to the sequel trilogy for some reason. I guess all things come in cycles, or as George Lucas said, Star Wars rhymes, kind of like real life, I suppose. There was no real creative head of the sequel trilogy. People will point and say Kathleen Kennedy, but if you actually look at her involvement, it seems like she was fairly hands-off in the overall trilogy. She pushed in some things to my understanding and in my opinion in terms of like saying, hey, include this, hey, we should do this, hey, this isn't a good idea, or hey, this is. But a lot of it was also just letting J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson do their thing in 7 and 8 with conflicting information on 9. Because we've also received a lot of information with 9 that there was tons of interference with what J.J. Abrams wanted to do. So who knows on that one. But there were also hints that Abrams had ideas for this trilogy at the beginning. And now, spoiler alert for Star Wars Episode 9, I'm going to talk about the identity of Rey. There were hints that Abrams already knew who he wanted Rey to be at the beginning of 7, because Rey's theme actually is a play off of the Emperor's March, the Imperial March, the typical theme of the Empire and of the Senate, Palpatine himself. This was a play off of that with some notes removed and pitched up and down and sort of done in a different way. You can find interesting analysis videos on YouTube about that, actually. And so to me, it seemed like already he had this idea of who he wanted Rey to be and where he wanted some of these characters to go. But the problem with no planning is that by just letting a new director come in, because you obviously had Abrams and then you had Rian Johnson come in, Rian Johnson was able to just go his entirely own direction. And I don't hate Rian Johnson. I understand trying to take things your own way and have your own creative input in a movie that you are making. But it led to a lack of cohesive understanding between the two directors. Abrams seemed to want nostalgia and to build off of this childlike love of the Force from the original trilogy, but Johnson wanted to push in a different direction. He pushed in the direction of forget the past, kill it if you have to. The idea of Star Wars should be more than Luke, Han, and Leia, and let's go a totally different direction. Those people shouldn't matter as much as they do. He went in that direction, and that very much upset people, but some people loved that direction. I'm not one of them, but some people did. And then you had 9 where Abrams comes back and he's sort of trying to pull it back from the forget the past to a mixture of, hey, new things, but also the nostalgia. And it just becomes this weird Frankenstein's monster of a trilogy that could have been so much better. There was also an unwillingness, it seems like, to split Star Wars Episode 9 into 2 films. I don't know why this was. If this had gotten the Deathly Hallows treatment, I think it would have been infinitely better. You could have expanded on the themes of Episode 9, made the Emperor's return a lot more impactful and drawn out, and made it make more sense. Now it seems like the only way it'll really make complete sense is by buying a bunch of novels that they're definitely making and going to make explaining these things. But this movie was trying to fix parts of 8 that it didn't like while also push forward, and that again is because of that lack of cohesive planning. The next point I do have is going to make some people mad. So I do say just listen to what I'm saying before you get really upset about it, because we're likely on the same page, if not in the same way, in a different way. I believe that Disney was very interested in virtue signaling and in trying to push ideologies and ideas that they believed would make money into these movies subtly without actually caring about them. Now, I can't prove that. This is all my opinion, so I feel like I might as well just stress that again, since Disney is one of the richest companies on earth and could completely obliterate me if they wanted to, obviously. But I do want to point a couple things out. You do have people like Abrams pointing out, I think it's important people see themselves represented in film. I think it's not a small thing. And I actually agree with that. I agree with the fundamentals of representation of different types of people. I agree with the idea that not a whole cast will just be one people group. That's just not how the world works. It's definitely not how a universe would work either. But at the same time, you have very hypocritical things that came along with these statements, not on Abrams' part, but on the part of the company. Because Finn was minimized completely in the Chinese release poster of The Force Awakens. They made him as small as they possibly could where you could barely see him, and then they cut out a ton of non-white characters from this poster. So if diversity was that important to the Star Wars brand, and it's an important ideology to them, why would you cave completely to censorship of that? If you really cared, wouldn't you just say, hey, look, if you won't take the movie the way it is, this is our creative vision, we're not releasing there. That's what you'd do if you really believed in it, I think. But it comes back to money. You know, you only care about these issues until you can't make money off of them, and then all of a sudden they don't matter. It's the same thing with the two girls who kiss in The Rise of Skywalker at the end. It's actually censored out of several different countries in their releases, but those countries still saw releases of the movies. Because even though Disney is such a massive corporation that they could stand to take the loss and stand up for what they believe in as a corporation, they don't. This rubs people the wrong way. It really does. It's not just me. Because this comes across as disingenuous. It doesn't come across as committing to what you believe in. It comes across to making money off of an issue that's important to a lot of people until you can't make money off of it, and then you ditch it and pretend that nothing happened. It's also very hypocritical in my opinion, because on Twitter, the Star Wars account also called John Boyega a hero after his speech in Hyde Park, which was about racism and about a lot of the issues going on in today's world, but then they're willing to basically just let him be censored out of a poster for the movie they're releasing. My point is not that, hey, companies can't talk about this. My point is not that, hey, nothing can be political at all. But my point is that if you actually cared, wouldn't you commit to those concepts? I'm not saying eat the rich. I'm not saying capitalism bad or all companies are evil. My point is just that this is a hypocritical way to behave that also rubs fans the wrong way and divides them completely. It makes a lot of fans think that you're going in a political direction, and it makes a lot of other fans think you're not committing to that direction, and then to pretty much everybody you come off as a hypocrite. I don't think that's a great way to market your movies or a great way to release them, and I think that it really did cause a schism in the fan base that did not need to be exacerbated at all. Like, we didn't need it to be torn further apart, and these things really did do that. I also think, finally, just to cap this off, I want to talk a little bit about how they're not listening to what fans want. Now, these are just a few examples that I want to run through. Instead of fully expanding new characters like Rey and Kylo with an animated series, what do? They decide to go the uninteresting route of Star Wars Resistance and talk about people who don't matter at all. That's definitely a smart idea. When we look at other things, fans wanted to see a sequel series to Rebels, or more of what happens to Ahsoka after the Clone Wars. What do we get instead of following this final season of the Clone Wars? A Bad Batch show. Oh wow, that's very exciting. And I'm not even saying I won't watch it, I just think it's kind of funny how they don't seem to understand what people actually like and want from this series. We also look at Knights of the Old Republic, something that I will never stop, giving the reach around to, and definitely saying you need to check this out and experience it. It's some of the best literature in video games and definitely in Star Wars. Fans want Knights back. Any fan that has experienced Knights that I've talked to, I'm sure there's going to be one person in the comments who doesn't, has wanted Knights of the Old Republic back. Instead, we get little bits and pieces of it that are changed throughout Rebels and other things, and we get an announcement of the High Republic era, which seems to be the stand-in for the Knights of the Old Republic, even though it's way later. It's supposed to be sort of the answer to that demand, but it's not what people wanted at all. And then finally, there's the talks to bring back George Lucas, which, even though he did create some of my favorite fiction ever, of all time, his complete creative control over the prequels led to a lot of people hating them. I get that now all of a sudden people don't, and they're amazing compared to the sequel trilogy, and that's just sort of the shift and dichotomy that there's been. But people hated those movies when they were launching, except for little kids. People hated them. I remember enjoying Attack of the Clones and loving Revenge of the Sith. It's still one of my favorites. And people used to call it Revenge of the SH word. You know, they used to completely take a dump on it and say that anybody who likes this movie is an idiot. Hayden Christensen's a terrible actor. A lot of these fans bullied Jake Lloyd to the point where he had a mental breakdown. Hayden Christensen left acting because it just wasn't fun for him anymore, it seemed like, after all of the pushback from the fans of Star Wars on the prequel trilogy. People hated those movies, and part of that was because George Lucas just had complete creative control. Nobody really held him back. He was surrounded by a bunch of people who said yes to everything he wanted. And also, his ideas for the sequel trilogy heavily involve midi-chlorians and weird character decisions for Luke Skywalker and others that people definitely wouldn't like if they didn't like the way that Episode 8 went. I just don't like how nobody is listening, really. I don't think that the fans fully know what they want. I think that there's a huge schism because of the direction that Star Wars has gone in recent years. And at the same time, I don't think that the company seems willing to listen to what fans are telling them. The fans who are saying, hey, if you're going to go in this direction, you should commit to it. And they're like, nah, I don't really want to. I'm just going to go this way instead. Or the fans who say, hey, I love the old stuff. Why don't you bring some of this back? And I'd love to give you money for it. And they say, nah, we'd rather pull out like little bits of it and resell it to you while also reprinting those books with the Legends title on them and getting you to buy them again, but they don't really matter. It's just frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating to me because, like I said, and I'll always say, I enjoyed the sequels. I loved The Mandalorian. I loved the final season of Clone Wars, minus the 4 episodes in the middle that I think are pretty mediocre. There has been stuff that Disney has made since coming back that has been incredible. Even Rogue One I'd put up there. But there's been a lot of mediocre stuff and a lack of interest in understanding what the community wants. And I really do think this is why a lot of people are getting burned out of Star Wars. I hope that it changes. I hope that they start to listen to the community at some point. No, I don't think we're entitled to anything. But at the end of the day, we pay the bills. We're the ones who are buying merchandise. We're the ones who are paying for movie tickets. We're the ones who are buying video games and books and toys and all this stuff. And if you want to keep getting that money, at a certain point, you do need to somewhat listen to what people actually want to see. Otherwise, you're shooting your own brand in the foot and definitely crippling its ability to last in the long term. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. This was probably the most video essay thing I've ever done because I really did want to take a look at these elements of Star Wars and actually expand upon my thoughts and tell you what I was thinking about it and just see what your interest is in that. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts down there. Be sure to check out the new Let's Play channel, the subreddit, the Discord, the Patreon, the Instagram, the Twitter. They are all linked in the description down below. I appreciate all of you who have listened this far. Have a fantastic day and stay shway, everybody. And hey, no matter what Star Wars you like, I always say it, be nice to each other. It's kind of the whole point of everything. This is all supposed to be fun fiction. It's not your entire life. It's okay to be disappointed with some of the stuff that's come out. I am too. We'll get over it. But we also should voice what we think. So I'll see you in the next one, everybody. Peace.